Several weeks ago, I was having a conversation with a very dear friend of mine, and I was telling her about a situation in my life that was making me really uncomfortable, that was pretty embarrassing, a moment when I felt totally inadequate to something that I cared very deeply about, that really mattered to me. And I was talking to her, and as I talked to her, I was in the process of really beating myself up for what had happened, and my inner critic, I could feel, was really taking over. As I looked back on that conversation now, I wonder if I wasn't looking for some sort of affirmation from her that, you know, things are not really that bad. You didn't do that badly. And probably there was a good slice of my own ego involved, telling me that, you know, normally I would do better. I'm not this kind of person. This is totally out of character for me. I am a much better person than the way I reacted in this particular instance. I was looking for her to offer me some comfort. That's what good friends are for, right? Sometimes. But instead of giving me comfort, instead of telling me that everything's going to be okay, she was silent. Too silent for too long, if you know what I mean. And then she said, you know, you're being too hard on yourself. As if you expected yourself to be perfect in this situation. And I wonder, if you're that hard on yourself, doesn't that make it harder for you to accept other people when they do something like that? And I looked at her and I went, what? That's not what I was expecting from you. I didn't say that. And then she said, well, I mean, if you have such high standards for yourself, doesn't that also lift the bar for everybody else? You know, we all have those periods of rough seas in our lives, she said. Maybe you just need to learn how to float on the surface once in a while and not try to dive deep every time something like this happens to you. You don't need to be always thrashing around in your life. If you can't show yourself some compassion, she said, it's really hard to show compassion for other people. Well, sometimes you don't get what you are looking for, but you get what you need. And those words were something that I needed at that point, the prophetic voice of a wise and trusted friend. Sometimes can be a beautiful thing, even if we don't want to listen to the prophets. We all have created barriers to love, particularly the love for ourselves. We have to protect ourselves from the harsh realities of living a human life. And one of the ways that we have chosen to protect ourselves is to develop this potent inner critic that reminds us often of the ways in which we are not perfect. Because when we acknowledge to ourselves and sometimes to others that we are aware of our imperfections, when we recognize and can articulate exactly what we did wrong, then we imagine that there's a chance that along the way down the road somewhere, we're finally going to get it right, and we will finally be worthy of the love that we're seeking. So it's natural then to feed that inner critic. By the time we're out of our teens, as a matter of fact, we've fed it all those negative emotions and all those negative thoughts that we're not supposed to think or feel. And we drag this big bag of stuff around with us throughout our lives. And that causes us to not only criticize ourselves, but to criticize those around us when we see them exhibiting those thoughts or feelings that we have buried in our bag of stuff. We hesitate to peek inside that bag, to accept our imperfections as something that might actually be permanent and not correctable, and as something that is simply a part of being human. When we're hurting, when someone has made us feel less than, or inadequate, or angry, we add insult to injury by judging ourselves to be other than what we actually are. Superhuman. And just maybe, as my friend suggested, we could begin to accept ourselves and our human flaws and just live in the moment of who we are right now. And then see what happens. The conversation that I had with my friend spurred me into doing a little bit of research on self-compassion, on acceptance. And since I already have a mindfulness practice, I found this book on mindful self-compassion. It's written by two very gifted therapists and authors by the name of Christopher Germer and Kristen Neff. Germer and Neff. The practices I'm going to invite you to engage with later this morning are from their book called The Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. And so if you are interested in learning more about this, I recommend that you consider it. It's called the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook. Like many mindfulness practices, the steps that it outlines are very simple, but of course they're not always easy. It's not easy to resist that inner critic and the inner suffering that it causes, she or he causes. I'm going to begin briefly by outlining the three simple elements of mindful self-compassion that they talk about, and then we're going to, if you're comfortable, then we're going to practice it together. Okay, so let me just give you the three steps that they recommend to be more compassionate to yourself. The first step is mindfulness. Some of you may already have a mindfulness practice. Mindfulness involves being aware of our moment-to-moment experiences without judgment. And without judgment is the crucial piece of that. Mystics throughout the ages have taught us that there is a split second between having an experience and judging that experience. One of my favorite theologians from the 19th century, Friedrich Schleiermacher, used to say that this is where God resides, between that moment of experiencing something and judging it. And if we develop practices, mindfulness practices that help lengthen that period of time between having an experience and judging it as either good or bad, we can actually prevent a lot of internal suffering. So mindfulness, noticing what you're experiencing, allowing all your thoughts and feelings and emotions and sensation to enter your awareness, without judging it, without resenting it, without any kind of resistance, is crucial to the skill. You choose to float on the rough seas of your experience. And sometimes that's going to mean that we are noticing those thoughts and feelings that we have buried deep in that bag that we've been dragging around. Those emotions that we're not supposed to feel when we're at our best selves. Like resentment, like anger, like shame. This is part of the inner critic's work, is to make us feel that and then to resist that feeling, because it might reflect badly on us. So in the blink of an eye, we dig up this feeling and our inner critic goes, oh, I'm having a feeling, but that's a bad feeling. I shouldn't be having this feeling. And so I'm a bad person for having this feeling, and it gets buried again. All of this is done unconsciously, of course. When we have a mindfulness practice, over time, we develop the skill to just notice that emotion without judging it and sitting with it. So saying, I'm feeling embarrassed. Sitting there and noticing the embarrassment, feeling that heat rise in your neck and your face flush, just experiencing it without saying, this is a bad feeling. So that's the first step, mindfulness, just feeling what you're feeling, experiencing what you're experiencing without any kind of judgment. And then the second step to self-compassion is to have a sense of interconnectedness. Is to recognize that whatever feeling you have or whatever thought you have, that it has been thought before, that people the world over have that feeling, and to recognize that it is part of the human experience and you are part of humanity. We may think that things are always supposed to go well. Our inner critic will tell us that things are supposed to go well, but in actuality, they don't always go well. So you might say to yourself, wow, I'm feeling embarrassed. Wow, I'll bet you there are millions of people right now that are feeling just as embarrassed as I am. So that's the second step, to recognize that you have a feeling that's common to all humans. And then the third step is what I was showing the children and youth earlier, and that is to do something to soothe ourselves, to take care of ourselves. When we make a mistake or we fail in some way, our first response is always or usually to beat ourselves up over it, as if tearing ourselves down is going to fix the problem that we're in. But it doesn't. I mean, think about it. How many times have you beat yourself up for being angry? Does that ever keep you from being angry again? No, it doesn't. So instead of beating yourself up, instead of letting your inner critic take over, try treating yourself as if, as someone would treat you if they saw you in that situation. Offer yourself some warmth and unconditional acceptance. So rub your skin, put your hands across your belly, cradle your face. So those are the three steps. Be mindful of your emotions, remember your common humanity, and be kind to yourself. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking right now, wait a minute, I was always taught that life was about being tough and strong. This is going to make me weaker and more vulnerable. Or you might be thinking that harsh self-criticism is actually the thing that improves your actions, right? That drives you to higher standards. But these things are not really true. Self-criticism may be linked to our self-esteem. If we're critical of ourselves, it can build our self-esteem. But it doesn't lead to a sense of well-being. And it certainly never leads to stronger relationships and acceptance of people around us. So with those few guidelines, I want to invite all of us to practice this skill. If you are not comfortable with this, that's okay, because we're all going to close our eyes, so nobody's going to notice that you're not participating. If you feel you need to stretch a little bit to make yourselves more comfortable in your seats, you can do that now. But let's begin by closing your eyes. And I want you to think of a situation in your life that is causing you stress, or has caused you stress in the past, because this also works for those things that may have happened to us years ago that we still are beating ourselves up for occasionally. It might be a health problem, a relationship problem, a work problem. Choose a problem that's in the mild to moderate range, since we're just practicing this for the first time. And visualize the situation clearly in your mind's eye. What does the setting look like? Who is there? What's happening? What are you concerned might happen? And now that you have that situation in your mind, I want you to consider where you might feel discomfort in your body. Locate in your body where you're finding the emotion. And name that emotion to yourself as best you can. Try not to judge that emotion as positive or negative, but just experience it. This is mindfulness, the first step. And now I want you to try saying to yourself, feeling this way is a part of life. It is part of the human experience. Everyone feels this way sometimes, just like me. I am not alone in this. Remembering your common humanity helps you move from your particular experience to the universal human experience of being alive. And now I want you to offer yourself a gesture of soothing touch. Maybe feeling that wonderful skin-on-skin sensation, that caring, soothing feeling. And then finally, follow with some words of kindness and support, something that you need to hear right now in this difficult situation. You might say to yourself, I'm accepting myself as I am. I accept myself with these feelings. I forgive myself for having these feelings, these thoughts. Offer this message to yourself. As you gently open your eyes, I want you to take a moment to reflect on what this experience was like for you. Did you experience a subtle shift in perspective as you were mindful about your thoughts, as you remembered your common humanity, as you soothed yourself in some way? It is often easiest to practice this after you have been in a stressful situation. I have begun using this for many things that have happened in my past that I start ruminating on, and I start feeling bad about myself again. And if I can locate the emotion that is bringing up for me and go through this practice, it's really helpful. So to do it after the fact is helpful. And as you practice this skill, it becomes easier to actually calm yourself during a stressful situation as well. As you practice this, you will find that it leaves you more open and accepting of the situation that you are in. It leaves you more open and accepting to the people that are around you. And that eventually all of this can lead you to becoming a more compassionate person, which is the one thing that will eventually lead to a more compassionate world. So thank you for engaging in this practice with me. I wish you all more compassionate days ahead. May it be so, and blessed be.